Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video, I'm going to take a look at something I discussed yesterday in the live to talk about where United are actually at and where they have been and why, without lowering the standards of the club, it is important to actually take a hard and honest look at what United have become and the step-by-step process that it's going to take and is in progress to getting back to the top. And in the end, I think you'll actually be rather encouraged by the situation at United if you can face the reality of what is. And that's the hardest part. And that's something that I think a lot of people maybe don't get or don't want to get. Because, of course, we all look at Manchester United and historically a club that has been ultimately incredibly successful. And even post Sir Alex, we've seen, wow, we were regularly in the Champions League and regularly in these positions. But the reality is, you actually take a look at the last 15 years, it's been a diminishing situation for some time that culminated in United, quite frankly, establishing itself as, for lack of a better word, a mid-table club. A very prickly one with a bit more resources, but a mid-table club for a lot of reasons. Quality of a team, where it's at, and the reality of its position is, of course, not just based on the amount of talent on the pitch. We've seen teams with a lot of talent vastly underperform, including United, and we've seen teams with less talent consistently overperform. Smaller budgets, smaller money, and all of that overperform. Now, of course, at the end of the day, United isn't in anything long-term a mid-table club. It shouldn't have aspirations of a mid-table club. It shouldn't be looking or operating like a mid-table club. But the fact is, it was. And we're going to talk about some of the points and the directions and where things were at. But the truth is, and this is compounded a little bit with the financials that were released today as well, United were a club with a bad culture, an old rundown training ground, infrastructure was bad, direction was bad, the executives were probably mid-table at best. You could argue that the way that United had been run and the people in charge were certainly not individuals of a talent level of a top club, that's for sure. But let's take a look at it. And this is why I genuinely do not panic week in and week out. This is why I don't overreact to the losses. This is why I don't get so upset. This is why I don't get bothered. It actually has very little to do with the manager. And it's going to bring us back to a video I did before the Europa League final that some of you may have watched and some of you may have not. And if you haven't, I recommend you do. I made these points back then. And prior to all of the excitement of a transfer window and the constant feeling that I get myself of over-optimism and that, oh my God, we've signed these players and now we're ready to win the league again, that we all feel every single year, there was a harsh reality that faced us. Let's take a look at it. United are a mid-table club. Why I personally don't panic week after week. That's the title. Before the Europa final, I made this video, and it was called, What Terrifies and Inspires Me About This Final. It came out back in May 19th. Of this year. And one of the things I showed in this was a graph of United's points totals year over year. And I utilized essentially an averaging system to show the actual direction that the club had been going for quite a long time. And if you look at the trend for the points overall, it was a straight line down, even from Moyes to these were points at home, very specifically this graph, which I found really, really interesting. Barring a random outlier here, and even one bad outlier here, the overall trend for United points, specifically at home, had been plummeting year over year over year. And one of the things that I pointed out in this video was that there was a long-term decline going on. We know it was a decline from Sir Alex, but it wasn't a straight cliff and then a flat line, and we were still kind of a top four club. No, it had actually been declining for a long time in terms of how you look at it. Even through LVG to Jose to Oli to Ten Hag and past, it's been a long-term decline. And interestingly, one of the reasons that I looked at it from a home game basis specifically is that I had a little bit of a perception or an inkling myself, just observationally, that United had stopped scaring teams. That teams wouldn't come to Old Trafford anymore and say, crap, we're playing against Manchester United. They wouldn't have any of that fear, and that the magic, the fear, the what would you call it? I don't know, the intimidation of United, its aura was gone. It's been drifting and diminishing and drifting and diminishing and drifting and diminishing for years. And the reality is that is backed up by the numbers. United, specifically at home, they've had some interesting away seasons, but at home, they actually struggled. Actually struggled a lot. And it got worse and worse year after year after year. And to me, that spoke to the idea that one thing I thought is that despite all of the troubles, one of the reasons United stayed at the top is people still viewed them as United. But as we moved further away from the period of success, the less that would be happening, the less players would be thinking about the United of old, the less they would even know about the United of old. You've got players playing today that have never actually seen United successful. They were 7, 8 years old when United were successful. And those are players on the pitch and they have no fear of United. And a lot of clubs don't. And a lot of people don't, especially domestically these days. And anyway, this video was a really harsh look at the reality of that and how we'd faded into, where do we have any longer this deserving of being a top club? You don't get it. You're not handed it. You're not gifted it. You have to earn it. And you can ride off of confidence for a long time. I look at Liverpool and I look at how with Klopp in the year after they rode that confidence. And once it's been broken this season, they're actually terrible. They shouldn't be as bad as they are. But it was like they were riding this confidence streak, this intimidation streak. And the minute it was gone, suddenly it was like the floodgates opened and they became human, ultimately very human from an elite, almost invulnerable status. That's United as a whole. And it had broken. And I was really worried about it. And I said, look, my concern is not that we won't fix it, because I think we will. And I made that point during the video that I thought we would fix it, and we have the people in place, but it's going to be a step-by-step process, and it's going to be quite painful that we will have to climb up once again as if we were a mid-table club. So I spoke about all this at the end of last season with an understanding of truly what it might look like. The expectations I had at that time were ugly. Honestly, they were ugly, as well, in terms of where we were at and the expectations for what that could result in the future season. I figured, all right, we could maybe spend 100, 120 million. We'd get something like Liam Delap, Tyler Dibling. We wouldn't really get to reinforce the midfield much. We'd get a keeper in. We'd be able to buy a few players, some young players, or a Quenda and a Delap and a Hackney and maybe we get a center back too or something. But that was the expectation prior to summer. That not that we were definitely getting those players, but the worry essentially was that, all right, we don't have a lot of money. We're going to have to go into full rebuild mode, buy some young players, and slowly climb ourselves up the table. The expectations were very low. And I think I said in the video many times that the goal for me, if I look at that lineup, 8th would be rough. 8th would be hard, but doable. Maybe worse now. Honestly, if I look at it now, I'm like, holy shit, that lineup might have finished 12th, right? But but those are my expectations. These are from my videos from prior to summer in terms of what might happen. Now, they were able to significantly overachieve on that, but pre-summer, 8th place was the genuine aim and what I thought we'd be going for. These are the teams we might have ended with, but of course, because of some of the ways that they've dealt with the finances, the ways that they sorted money out, the ruthlessness in the market in terms of kicking players out, where they were able to move on a lot of salaries, sell Garnacho and Antony and get these deals out the door, we were able to, of course, invest higher and further than we expected, right? So we were able to get a good window, a really good window, in my opinion. Cunha, Mbumo, Šeško, Lamens. And with that, I said my expectation was top 6, top 5. That's where we should be. And that's what my intention was. Because I figure, all right, realistically, getting those players in, they help us a lot, and we should be doing better. So top 6 became kind of the expectation. But the most important thing was improvement. Because the reality is, were we actually a 13th place squad? And the truth is we were. We were a 13th place team. That is the truth. And I think it's, just before I dig into these points about improvement, I think the thing that's really, really hard to accept, but if you look at that declining graph over years, it was not a false position. We all wanted it to be. We all felt like, oh, no, it's a blip. It's a blip. It's nothing. It's not real. We can't actually be this bad, but we were. That's the scary part about all of this, and that's what terrified me when I was looking at before the Europa League final. I was going, we are that bad. Now, yeah, we could have won more games in the league and maybe been higher on the table if we weren't focused on Europa and stuff. But it's not like we had that many more options, And it wasn't just the squad. It was the mess that was going on behind the scenes. The common theme since Ineos have got in, and I don't care if you call this PR or this or that or whatever, but the common theme since Ineos got in, and it is the truth, is that everything they dealt with was worse than what they thought it was going into it. The finances, worse. The infrastructure, worse. The data, worse. The scouting, worse. Everything was worse. The coaching, the analytics, the medical department, worse. Look at the injuries. Look at everything that was going on. So when we talk about being a mid-table club and acknowledging the reality of just how bad things got, it's not that we didn't have good players, but that is only one facet. If you were to measure a club in terms of success, how good is its fitness? How good is its health? How good is its analytics? How good is its data? How good is its coaching? How good is its scouting? How good is its recruitment? All of that together, you would rate United in the bottom half of all of that. Forget the squad quality. All of that you could rate probably in the bottom 5 in the Premier League. Not anymore. Not now. They said about fixing a lot of that, and I think a lot of it has been fixed through summer and moving forward. But that's where we were. We deserved to be there. That's the hard part. That's the part that's so tough to accept. We deserved to be in 13th, 14th, 15th place. That was where United were. And it wasn't false, and it wasn't bullshit. That's what we were. So everything seemed to be worse than we expected. And as the curtain got pulled back from Ineos coming in, it was worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and scarier and scarier. Let's go to that next. So, looking at that, then the expectations was, of course, the fact that we have the ability to spend, where we can get the quality of players like Cunha, Mbumo, Šeško, Lamens, certainly means we can accelerate our climb up the table compared to a real mid-table club, right? Someone like a Bournemouth, a Brighton that doesn't have those resources, you're not going to expect them to go from 15th to like 6th or 5th in 1 year, but because we have those resources, we certainly can. So have United improved? And the truth is, yes, dramatically, actually. After 15 games, United have gone from 13th with 19 points to 25, which is 5th best in the league. In expected goals, United have gone from 23.8, which is 10th, to 30.28, which is 2nd. In goals actually scored, United have gone from 19, which was 14th, to 26, which was 3rd. So, of course, those new signings working out quite well there. In terms of non-penalty expected goal differential, you might think that's a word salad of things there, but it's meaningful. Do you create more chances than the opposition, essentially is what it means, regardless of whether you're scoring them or not. And yes, United went from a negative, which it has been for 2 seasons, in 11th, to a positive 7.24, 4th best in the league. And in terms of losses, they went from 6 down to 4 in those first 15 games. And what else? Well, everything, quite honestly. I mean, it's kind of nuts. You may not believe this. But look, like I said, United were that bad. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't unlucky. United were that bad. Shots on target, United have gone from 12th to 1st. Big chances, United have gone from 12th to 4th. Touches in opposition box, United have gone from 9th to 4th. Expected goals. United went from 10th to second. Which one am I on now? And then this is, and just so you see, this is actually the previous year as well. Shots on target. United were 8th. Now we're, again, first. The previous year, this is previous. United were 10th in touches in the opposition box, or 8th in touches in the opposition box. Now, again, second. Big chances. United were 14th. Again, 4th. So it's not just last season that Ruben made us so bad and the stats were so bad. In fact, they were just as bad, if not worse, the prior year. That is 2 years of United being, by every metric, a bottom half side. So yes, the progress this season and being suddenly 4th, 2nd, 3rd, 1st in all of these metrics is a meaningful progress that really, really should not be ignored. Because it's 2 years of it. It's not a fluke. It's where United were. That is the team that was built. That is the squad that was built. That is where United were as a club. A bottom half performing side for 2 years. Not 6 months, not 3 months, 2 years. That is a long time. So there is significant progress in that direction. But James, standards. Okay? Standards have been gone for ages. That's the truth. The standards have been gone for ages. We can scream about standards all we want, but they don't magically make United something that they haven't been. It's been years. You don't magically have a contending team because you've changed managers. In fact, we've seen this before. We've seen flashes and things like this. When Jose got sacked and Ollie came in, we saw this flash, and then United ended up exactly where they were when Jose left. When Rangnick came in for Ollie, we saw like 45 minutes of a flash against Crystal Palace, and we ended exactly where we were beforehand. You don't magically just get better. You get better over time and in the windows. It improves your squad, and then more time on the ground, you should see regular growth and improvement. You don't go from being a 12th to 14th place team for 2 years in terms of performance to suddenly being better because you changed managers. It's just not how it works. And we're talking years, not 3 months, years. It had been an 18-month decline. We didn't start with a sudden top team after sacking Ten Hag. It was 13th. And I made this thing in Paint the other day to actually kind of show this, and it's very funny, but I think simple illustrations are sometimes the best. This is where Ollie, this is his summer. He brought in Varane, Sancho, and Ronaldo, right? And we had just finished in the top 4, second or something, right? And we saw a decline. And by the end of that season, we were in 6th, I think it was, right? Ten Hag gets his summer, gets his signings in, he takes over, drives us into 3rd place, an upward growth. Right? This is summer 2023, right? Summer 2023. From there on, we go from top 4 to finishing in 8th and all the way down into 13th by the time he was sacked with 2 summers on the table. With no summers and no windows with Ruben Amorim, we did not see improvement. It was a flat line, right? We didn't get better. We didn't get worse. We were where we were. It was pretty much exactly the same. But this is a long-standing decline of 18 months up to this period and then a flat line. We get into summer, and the reality is, as of this point in time, we are seeing a significant growth from where we were. It is a huge improvement from where we were when you visualize it. We didn't just magically start up here after changing managers. We had to grow from being this poor of a team. And yeah, this is in the market. That's the point. The market helps you do this. Buying players and improving the squad helps you do this. That's the point of it. That's, the same as we improved the squad here for that season by adding Lissandro and Eriksen and Casemiro and such, who despite, other faults, were very effective in that first season. We added players in 23 and we got worse. We added players in 24 and we got worse. So, that is usually the measure of things. But when you visualize it overall, it's a long decline. And right now it's quite a fast increase from where United have been. That's just the truth. My standards, and I probably would bet that these are Ineos standards there, or Wilcox and Omar and Sir Jim with their intense discussions against Wolves, is number 1, You have to see an upward trending progress. You have to, right? That's what's the most important thing to measure, that the trend is up, period. It has to be going up. That's first and foremost. If it's going down, if we're getting worse, if we're not going in the right direction, that's it. Then we're failing at this point in time, right? Second, how much progress, I think then is very important. For me, it's a minimum of top 6 with the summer that we had. We need to be around top 6 and finishing there by the end of the season. That would constitute progress for me, because it's not just a little progress. You can't just go from 12th to, even though we were a 15th place team, deservedly so, we can't go from 15th to 12th and call that enough progress, right? That's not enough. We need to be, from my measure, in the top 6 at worst. I think with a push, top 5, depending on how certain things go. Number 3, we need to see performance, consistency, and improvement over the course of the season. We're seeing number 1, we're seeing number 2, but 100% agreed on this. I think everybody would say, including myself, I'm not convinced yet on the performances, right? It's still very inconsistent. It's still, in my opinion, that's largely a player issue, but it's still a bit too inconsistent. I'd like to see us by the end of the season, especially in the second half of fixtures against teams when, the other aspect where we've already played them, I'd like to see us winning a lot more of those games against lower sides. I care a little less what happens in the big games. I want to see consistency against the smaller teams, that we're picking up 3 points at a much higher rate against those smaller sides. United have the best record against the top half in the entire league, I believe. But that's not necessarily what gets you up the table, and that speaks to an issue we've had in the past. That, again, why I still feel it's a player issue, but doesn't matter. I want to see more consistency and improvement over the course of the season. We should be getting better. That's the point. It's still 16 games. We're still in the first half of the season. Performance-wise, the second half of the season should look better than the first half. We should be getting better as the season goes on. More time on the ground, more familiarity between players, more all of that. Obviously, AFCON throws a little wrench in this, but I think that that's important. With the same players, we should see improvement over the season, not decline. So the second half of the season should look better than the first half. And then I'd like to also see higher levels of commitment and energy. I'd like to see more, this kind of ties into number 3, but that we should see more consistency where, in terms of like application, that we're not seeing them give up after scoring a goal, that we're not seeing those things. And look, I think it's on the players, but obviously as well, I think that the coach has recourse and has to be able to do something to change that. One way or another, he's got to have a strategy to change it, whether it's play them through it and let them embarrass themselves, whether it's subbing them. I don't care what the strategy actually is, but he has to fix it. He's still responsible, not for it happening, because it's been happening for a long time, but he is responsible for how he reacts to it, and I'd like to see more from Ruben Amorim on that front, on maybe it's not consequences, but what are you actually doing to fix that? Because it is a problem. The mental drop-off when we score, the only waking up when we concede, especially in smaller games, there's still that going on, and we've seen it get a little bit better where they can turn it around mid-game, but I want to see more of that. So I'm not convinced on 3 and 4 as of yet. But you review at the end of the season, which is what they're going to do. If we're on track during the year, cool. And we are. We're on track on 1 and 2 right now. It's going to plan. But if at the end of this season, you can't confidently answer all 4 of these questions, not just 1 and 2, but for me, all 4 of them, then you make a change. And it's easy at that point to make a change. But following that, it is very easy to make a change. If Amorim reaches this, if you say, yes, we've got all 4 of these, we're happy, we've progressed, we're going forward, we're going to give Amorim players this summer. Good. Well, if you do that, and then next season it's flat, and we remain a top 5 or 6, even with more players added, then that's fine. Then you make a change because all right, Amorim has reached his ceiling. He's finished. He's done what he did to improve the team, to help us build the team we wanted, help us build the squad we wanted. Now we need somebody else to take us up to the next level. And that would be easy at that time to do so. So that's that. There you go. See how it's all made in PowerPoint there. So that's my feelings on that. And I do genuinely believe it. I do genuinely believe that this is what United are. They have been a mid-table club. And, again, I recommend you watch that video because I could not be more honest in my assessment there of where United really were. I'm not being disingenuous or just backing the manager, which I don't believe in, by the way, by saying that this is progress and that we're on our way up and kind of being relaxed about the situation in terms of the direction that the club is, even though during mid-matches, before or after, I get just as angry as everybody else or just as happy because, ultimately I'm a fan. But when I can step back and look, it's just, it's what it is. It doesn't really bother me. And I think that we're on the right track. One of the other things today, just as a little bit of a bonus, is obviously our financials have come out and they represent a slight improvement over last season. Now, we've kind of talked about the finances and things like that. One of the headlines is United don't have a lot of money. They've drawn down on their credit line to increase to the largest amount ever in terms of net debt. Now, it should be noted that that was, of course, for transfers. As it looks here, net cash flow from financing activities was 102 million. And one of the main reasons for that is, of course, that United spent a lot on players, but they also spent a lot upfront on players. And the players that they bought with this, Mbumo, Lamens, Sheshko, very, very valuable players. So even though United drew down more finances to pay for players in summer, in essence, you could turn around and say that we have a higher asset value. But at the same time, we actually drew down 100 million less than we drew down last year to do transfers. So that speaks to an improved cash flow position, improved financial position. There's also the factor that United's wages have now reached their lowest point even after buying these players. And we have big expiring contracts, Maguire, Casemiro, expenses, amortizations, costs paid for those players, wages paid for those players that will all be disappearing this year, as well as further departures of other players as their contracts are ending and things like that. So we can actually expect to see probably that credit line paid down a bit and the financial picture even improve more by next summer. And I can tell you that obviously there'll be a little more details that come out each quarter and everything, but I think it's all significantly and well aligned with my current understanding, which is United will be fine. And they might be saying, and you might hear, they don't have much money. They don't have much money. I mean, that's fine. That's their prerogative to work with that. And, they can technically say it because, yes, of course, you're using credit and using debt and things like that as a means to buy players and to service things and all of that and whatever. So there's a technicality in that. That's true. But as you know, there's many times in the past that I've said, they actually don't. And that's the other factor about United being a mid-table club. Even though we have a bit more spending power than others, the real top clubs have not had to sit there, clubs in top position, and make decisions that are so financial all the time, that are so financially driven, make decisions in the market, worry about sacking a manager because they couldn't even afford it and they were going to violate PSR, which is what happened. That is the type of decision-making that does plague mid-table clubs, that they're always worried about their finances. They have to look at their finances first, and they're always limited by it. City aren't limited by their finances. Liverpool aren't limited by their finances. Arsenal aren't limited by their finances. United, to be a top club, again, have to be able to make football decisions almost regardless of finances and say, good, what do we have to do to become the best football club? We haven't been able to do that for a long time. We've always had to look at finance first and then football. And that is changing, and that's one of the other things that will change. But that is one of the other factors in the reality of United's bleak position prior to now. So a lot of this has been fixed. A lot of what has happened to United and where United have been at has changed. And moving forward, we cannot say that United are a mid-table club and should be judged based on mid-table standards. But we've just climbed out of that bracket, and we're just moving towards where we should be. And the next couple of windows and the next, the rest of this season and the following season are really going to be where United can pursue those standards and reestablish them as being a perennial top four club that competes for titles at the same time. And that's where they should be. But it is a step-by-step to get there. And the resources that we have and the size of the club that we have, It means we can shorten that process where this is our build season to take that step from bottom half into the top 5, 6, and the next season get to be where we should be remaining for the indefinite future. And that is a competitive club. So those are my thoughts. That's my perspective on it. You can agree, disagree. We can debate till the cows come home on tactics, on systems, on platforming, on all sorts of complicated stuff we can. And certainly it's all valid. But underlying all of that, where have we been? Where are we now? And do we continue to see growth towards where we need to be? And that will still be the most important thing, because everything else is not objective. Everything else is very subjective. Everything else is very opinion-based. And everything else is, maybe a discussion for the next step in terms of, do we have the right person to maximize all the talent that we have? And we may not. I'm not convinced. Like I said, I laid out the categories for me. I'm not convinced yet. Not at all, actually. But I am convinced that we're seeing progress. And for now, that's the most important thing. All right. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next one.